My girlfriend snapped. Nobody's holding you hostage. You know where the exit is. After I asked her to stop flirting with the AV vendor at my work event. My boss and 2 coworkers heard it. I didn't argue. I saved one text notification, but 6 weeks later, the vendor's fiancé held up his phone and asked about the 11 p.m. message. Nobody's holding you hostage. You know where the exit is. She said that to me in a hallway full of people I had to see every single Monday morning, loud enough that 2 coworkers walking past slowed down to listen. The worst part wasn't that she flirted with him. It was that she chose his laughter over my discomfort in a room full of people I have to face for the rest of my career there. I didn't raise my voice that night. I didn't raise it for 6 weeks. Something in me just went quiet and started keeping track of everything I was looking at. This is the story of what happens when the quiet one finally does something with everything he's been keeping track of. Jenna's company sent her to my office holiday party every year, even though she didn't work there, because she was better at working a room than half the people who actually did. That wasn't a complaint. It was just true. She remembered names. She remembered birthdays. She could make a stranger feel like the most interesting person in the building inside 90 seconds. For 2 years and 3 months, I told myself that was a gift she gave to everyone, and I happened to be lucky enough to be the one she came home with. There were 2 times before that night when something in me flinched and I talked myself out of it. The first was 8 months in, when a former client of hers kept texting her things that had nothing to do with work, and she laughed it off as just how Marcus from accounting is. He's harmless. I let it go because she let me read the thread, and there was nothing in it I could point to directly. The second was at her cousin's wedding, when she spent 20 minutes at the bar with an ex-boyfriend, leaning into every joke he made, touching his arm twice in a way she never touched mine in public. When I asked her about it in the car, she told me I was being paranoid over nothing, that old friends just talk like that. I believed her, because believing her was easier than the alternative. So when my company's year-end party rolled around, I wasn't looking for anything. I was looking forward to introducing her to the people I worked with, the way you do when you're proud of who you're standing next to. I had no idea that somewhere in that room was a man named Marcus, hired for the night to run sound and lighting, and that within an hour I would be learning exactly how loud my girlfriend's laugh could get for a stranger. The party was held in the executive lounge on the 32nd floor, glass walls on 3 sides, a jazz trio set up near the bar my boss had personally approved the budget for. I was deep in a conversation with 2 people from my team when I noticed Jenna across the room, standing closer to the AV setup than the party itself required. Marcus was tall, mid-30s, wearing a black polo with the production company's logo stitched on the chest. He said something, and Jenna laughed, not her polite laugh, the real one, the one that tips her head back. She touched his forearm once, then again 30 seconds later, her hand lingering a half second too long the second time. My boss was 11 feet away, talking to the CFO, and I watched his eyes drift toward them and then toward me. I walked over, kept my voice low, and asked Jenna if I could talk to her for a minute. She rolled her eyes but followed me into the hallway outside the lounge. I didn't accuse her of anything. I told her, as evenly as I could manage, that I wasn't comfortable with how close she was standing to him, and that I'd appreciate her reading the room a little. "I'm literally just making your vendor feel welcome," she said. "That's what I do. That's the entire job." I said I understood that, but this wasn't a work event for her. It was mine, and my boss was 11 feet away watching the whole thing. That was when something in her face changed, and she said it loud enough that the 2 coworkers passing through the hallway both turned their heads. "Nobody's holding you hostage. You know where the exit is." I didn't say anything back. I felt the words land somewhere behind my sternum, and then I felt the strangest thing happen next, which was nothing. No anger, no heat in my face, just a kind of stillness, like a thermostat clicking off. "That's not what I meant," she said. Quieter now, glancing at the 2 coworkers still standing there. "I just mean, if you're going to act like this every time I talk to someone, that's on you, not me." It was the kind of line that almost made sense if you didn't think about it too hard, which is exactly the kind of line she was good at. I looked at her for a second longer than I needed to, said okay, and walked back into the party alone. I didn't look back to see if she followed. I found a spot near the windows and stood there for a few minutes, doing the thing where you hold a drink so people assume you're fine. Priya found me there. She'd run every major event at the company for 3 years, which meant she also ran the seating charts, the vendor contracts, and the guest list for whatever came next on the calendar. "You just walked back in here looking like someone who signed a bad contract," she said, studying my face instead of the room. I told her it was nothing, which she clearly didn't believe, because she kept standing there instead of moving on to the next thing on her clipboard. She'd worked with Marcus's production company for 2 events now, she mentioned, and they were already locked in to run sound for the spring product launch in March. She said it like a piece of logistics, not a setup, because that's exactly what it was. She had no idea what she was actually telling me. I just nodded and said something about the lighting being nice that night, which it was. She gave me a look that said she'd let it go for now, but hadn't actually let it go, and went back to managing the room the way she managed everything, with one eye on every corner at once. I didn't know yet what I was going to do with what I'd just heard. I only knew I wasn't going to forget it. I didn't bring it up with Jenna again that night, or the next morning, or the week after. When she texted Marcus 2 days later, I saw the notification light up on her phone where it sat face up on the kitchen counter, and I took a photo of it before she came back into the room. I didn't read further than what was already visible. I didn't need to yet. She seemed to relax over the following days, the way people do when silence gets mistaken for forgiveness. She started touching my arm again the way she used to, laughing a little too easily at things I said, watching my face for signs that the subject was closed. I let her believe that. I went to work the way I always did. I sat in on the planning meeting for the spring product launch, listened to someone confirm the vendor list out loud, and heard Marcus's company named again as the AV contractor for the event in March. I wrote the date down on a sticky note and put it in my desk drawer, underneath nothing important. I didn't have a plan yet. I just had a date, a photo, and the kind of patience that only comes from finally deciding to stop being surprised by people. Update 1. 6 weeks later, the company's spring product launch took over the rooftop banquet hall on the top floor, the kind of space with black glass cocktail tables and a rotating LED wall cycling through the new product's logo every few seconds. Caterers moved between clusters of executives, board members, and outside partners in suits that cost more than the appetizers. Marcus stood near the sound booth at the far end of the room, adjusting a mixing panel with the same easy confidence he'd had at the holiday party. A few feet from him, holding a glass of white wine and laughing at something a woman beside her had said, stood a woman I'd learned was his fiancée. I knew her name now, courtesy of Priya, who'd mentioned it weeks earlier without realizing what she'd handed me. I stood near the bar with my drink, watching the room, waiting for Priya to take the stage. Priya walked toward the small stage at the front of the room with a microphone in her hand and a clipboard tucked under her arm, the same confident walk she used for every event she ran. She'd changed into a navy blazer for the speeches, her badge still clipped to the front pocket, and the energy in the room shifted the way it always does when people sense the formal part of the night is about to start. On her way to the stage, a board member stepped directly into her path to ask whether the vendor recognition segment was happening before or after dinner service. She answered him without breaking stride, told him right after the keynote, gestured toward the catering staff already lining up near the kitchen doors, and kept walking, her focus already moving past him toward the microphone stand near the LED wall. I watched Jenna from across the room, near the bar where I'd been standing for the last 20 minutes. She was smiling toward the stage, half listening, a glass of champagne loose in her hand, her other hand resting on the shoulder of a woman beside her she'd apparently just met. The first stage of her face was simple, pleasant boredom, the look of someone waiting for a corporate event to finish so the actual party could start. Priya tapped the microphone once, the sound popping through the speakers, and started thanking the vendors who'd made the launch possible, the catering team, the florist, and then our sound and lighting partner this season, Marcus, who's been an absolute pleasure to work with. Jenna's smile flattened by a few degrees at the name, her eyes sliding sideways toward the sound booth before she could stop them. That was the second stage. The exact moment of recognition, her shoulders going rigid in a way that stillness doesn't usually look natural in a room full of moving people. Then Marcus's fiancée, standing close enough to Jenna that the two of them had been making small talk for the better part of 10 minutes without either one realizing who the other was, turned toward him and held up her phone, the screen still lit. "Marcus, who's Jenna?" she said, loud enough for the cluster of people around them to hear clearly. "What's this text from 11 p.m. about?" Marcus's name sat at the top of a message thread he clearly hadn't deleted as carefully as he thought he had. The third stage of Jenna's face arrived all at once. Color draining from her cheeks, her champagne glass tilting slightly in her hand, the kind of look that doesn't have time to smooth itself over before everyone nearby has already seen it. "I thought you said she was just a client," the fiancée said, her voice tight and getting tighter, turning the phone toward him so he could see exactly what she was reading. Marcus opened his mouth, and nothing useful came out. It's not. She's not. It was just a work thing, he said, and even the people standing closest could hear how little that sentence actually carried. A man near Jenna, someone from finance I recognized but didn't know well, turned his head slowly from her to Marcus and back again, his eyebrows lifting in the universal expression of someone watching a story rearrange itself in real time. Another woman beside him quietly set her drink down on the nearest table, the way people do when they sense they're about to need both hands free for nothing in particular. Priya, still holding the now muted microphone loosely at her side, leaned toward the small circle that had formed and said just loud enough for that circle to hear, "I just introduced the vendors. I don't write the texts." She wasn't performing it. She was simply stating a fact, and the fact landed harder than anything performed could have. Jenna opened her mouth to say something, glancing first at Marcus, then at the fiancé, then briefly at me across the room, but there was nothing left for her to control. The story had already left her hands the moment the phone came up, and everyone standing close enough to watch already understood exactly what they were looking at without anyone needing to explain it further. Marcus turned to Jenna last, his face somewhere between panic and self-preservation, and said the only thing he had left to say. "Don't make this about us," he said. "There is no us." Then he turned and followed his fiancée, who was already walking toward the elevators, her heels sharp and fast against the floor, not waiting to hear whatever he might have planned to say next. Priya called me that night, her voice still carrying a slight edge of adrenaline from running the rest of the event. "I have no idea what just happened back there," she said, "but half the room is talking about it, and somehow your name hasn't come up once." She walked me through it from the start, the introduction, the phone, the look on Jenna's face when the fiancé said the word text. She'd watched the whole thing unfold from 6 feet away while still technically working. I sat on my couch and listened, and when she finished, I didn't say much. Just one sentence, quiet, to myself more than to her. It was finally over, whatever it had actually been. There was no part of me that wanted to call Jenna that night, and I didn't. I didn't text her either. I let my phone sit face down on the coffee table the way hers had sat on the counter weeks earlier. And for the first time in 6 weeks, I wasn't thinking about what she might be doing in a room I wasn't in. By the time I went to bed, I'd already started thinking about Monday, not about her, but about the version of my schedule that no longer needed to make room for explaining her to anyone. Update 2. Jenna texted me 11 times over the next 2 days. The first few messages tried to explain what had happened, that she was just being friendly to one of the vendors, that she had no idea Marcus was engaged, that I had set the whole thing up to embarrass her, by even mentioning the launch to Priya in the first place, which wasn't true, and which I never bothered correcting. By the 3rd day, the messages had shifted from explaining to accusing. She said I'd clearly been planning this for weeks, that a normal boyfriend would have just talked to her privately instead of letting her walk into an ambush, and that the way I'd handled it said more about me than anything she'd done. Then she posted a story on social media, no names attached, but specific enough that anyone who'd been in that room could fill in the blanks, something about people who manufacture public moments, instead of having real conversations, and use other people's events to settle private scores. Within hours, 2 mutual friends texted me separately, asking what had actually happened, because Jenna's version didn't match the version already circulating from people who'd been standing close enough to hear it themselves. I told both of them the truth, plainly, without embellishment, the same way I would have described a meeting that had run long. Both conversations ended the same way: a long pause on the other end of the line, then some version of "Wait, she said what to you?" in the hallway, in front of people. Neither of them defended her after that, and neither of them brought it up to me again. What struck me most wasn't the texts or the story itself. It was that in 11 messages, sent across 2 full days, she never once asked whether I was okay, or said she understood why I might have been hurt by any of it. She was managing her image, carefully and quickly, the way she managed every room she walked into. She still believed the problem was that people had found out, not that she'd done something worth finding out about in the first place. About 3 weeks after the launch, Priya mentioned something to me over lunch in the break room, almost in passing, the way people mention things they don't realize matter to the person they're telling. She still kept in touch with a handful of people from the local event scene, mostly other coordinators and a few vendors who rotated through the same circuit of company parties and product launches Jenna used to tag along to. "Funny thing," Priya said, picking at her salad, "I heard Jenna wasn't at the Whitlock account dinner last weekend. She used to go to basically everything with that crowd." She said it like an observation, not a headline, because to her it was nothing more than scheduling gossip between coordinators who tracked who showed up where. I asked, as casually as I could manage, whether she knew why. Priya shrugged. Apparently nobody actually uninvited her. People just stopped looping her in. One of the girls from the Whitlock team told me, and I'm just repeating this. I have no idea if it's true that nobody wants to be the next person who gets called out in front of someone's fiancé. She laughed a little, already moving on to whatever was next on her schedule, completely unaware of what she'd just told me. I didn't laugh. I just nodded and changed the subject to something about the quarterly budget, but the sentence stayed with me for the rest of the afternoon, longer than I expected it to. The group Jinnah had always wanted to be seen by, the room she'd spent 2 years making sure she had a place in, were quietly closing around the space where she used to stand. One missed dinner invitation at a time, without anyone needing to make an announcement about any of it. On a regular Tuesday night, no music playing, no particular mood attached to it, I carried the last box of Jinnah's things out to her car myself, because she said she didn't want to make a scene coming up to get it. It took 4 trips. There was nothing dramatic about any of them, just boxes, a stairwell, the kind of ordinary tired you feel after moving furniture. Afterward, I made dinner for one, something simple, pasta with whatever vegetables were still good in the fridge, and ate it standing at the kitchen counter instead of sitting down at the table. I hadn't done that in months. Eaten standing up, no phone in my hand, no half-formed explanation running in the back of my mind for something I'd have to account for later. The apartment was quiet in a way it hadn't been in a long time, and for the first time since the holiday party, the quiet didn't feel like something I was bracing against. It just felt like a Tuesday. Final update. By the time 3 months had passed, the thing Jinnah had chosen over me, the attention, the rooms full of people who knew her name on sight, the version of herself she'd spent 2 years building across company parties and industry mixers, was the exact thing she'd lost, piece by piece, without anyone needing to take it from her directly. Priya told me over lunch again, this time not in passing, but because by now she knew I'd want to hear it. A mutual contact in the local events circuit, a coordinator named Renee, who Priya had worked alongside on 3 different launches that year, had mentioned Jinnah's name unprompted while the two of them were comparing vendor notes for an unrelated client dinner. She's changed jobs twice since spring, Priya said, setting her coffee down on the table between us. Once back in April, and again about 6 weeks ago. And her professional page, the one she used to post on constantly, every event, every outfit, every room she walked into, it's been dead for almost 6 weeks straight. Nothing. Not even a like on anything. I asked, careful to keep my voice level and ordinary, what had actually happened to make her step back from a circle she used to be the unquestioned center of. From what Renee told me, Priya said, nobody officially cut her off. Nobody made a scene about it. People just slowly stopped looping her in on things: group dinners, after parties, the usual rotation. One of the girls who used to invite her to everything finally said something out loud about it, and Renee heard it secondhand. She said Jinnah made it weird for everyone, not just him. That was the exact phrase. Made it weird for everyone. I sat with that for a moment, picturing the rooms Jinnah used to walk into like she already owned them, leaning into every conversation, making sure every space noticed she was there. Then I pictured those same rooms now, quietly rearranged around the shape of her absence. No confrontation, no public falling out, just a slow and total closing of doors she'd spent years propping open with her own hands. I didn't feel triumphant hearing it. I didn't feel much of anything sharp at all, which surprised me more than the news itself did, sitting there with my fork halfway to my mouth. I just nodded once, the way you nod when something finally settles into place after sitting crooked for a long time, and went back to finishing my lunch like it was any other Tuesday at work. It was the kind of quiet that comes after setting down something heavy you'd been carrying so long you forgot it had any weight at all. These days I've started seeing someone new casually, no real label on it yet. Last weekend we went to a small gathering with some of her friends, and at one point she stood near the kitchen island talking to a guy from her gym for a solid 10 minutes about something completely unremarkable. I noticed it for half a second, then kept talking to the person next to me about nothing in particular, and didn't think about it again for the rest of the night. That's new. I didn't used to be able to do that, let a room be a room, let a conversation be a conversation, without some part of me standing guard at the edge of it, counting seconds, watching hands. I still think about that hallway sometimes, the exact sound of her voice telling me where the exit was. I'm not wiser for any of it. I didn't walk away from that night with some lesson tucked under my arm. I just don't have to watch the room anymore. That's the whole difference. And it's enough.